Hi, this is Eternal King bringing you another LOR video today. I want to talk a little bit about why solitaire decks don't work in LOR and Eternal specifically. And the reason for that is oftentimes you commit an inordinate amount of resources to a single line of play that doesn't really accomplish anything. So I'll give you an example. Um, so it's very easy to, for example, build a rally Riven deck. There's a landmark in Noxus, and it is this landmark here. And then you can make a super big Riven very, very easily, just off of her, level up condition and all of her things. And boom, there's the basis for your deck, right? You've got Riven, you put in all the cards that say Reforge, her attack is going to be way over 5 power, and then she gets to swing twice a turn. And you go for OTK. The big problem with building a deck like this that's that one-dimensional is you get blown out by decks that are actually built properly. So I'll give you an example. I was playing Thralls into OTK Riven, and all I had to do was just sit and wait for them to fully commit and then blow them out with a single Frostbite. Now, I know I say that committing to your deck is good. There are a lot of champions that require a high degree of commitment. Azir Aurelia is an example of a deck that requires a high degree of commitment. Echo is an example of a champion that usually has to come down on 4 leveled. Jinx requires a high degree of commitment. All of these champions require a high degree of commitment. But that being said, they aren't one-dimensional, right? Jinx decks have removal. They have Mystic Shot, Get Excited, Blowout, which is the discard removal card. So they have a lot of interactivity baked in. And Thralls is the same way, right? You have your 3 of 3 sisters giving you access to both Fury of the North and Flash Freeze. You're always going to have 3 of 3 sisters in a Thralls deck. And also giving you Entomb, with the big overwhelmed Thralls, is sometimes the right play to remove the blocking body at speed and then swing and hit for 8 damage. So you've got that. You've got Sands of Time as an immediate 3 of. You never stop running Sands of Time in a Thralls deck. You've got Blighted Ravine as a 3 of. You never stop running Blighted Ravine. Time in a Bottle allows you to predict and set up your draws. So there's a little bit of deck interactivity there, a little bit of draw fixing. And of course, I like Succumb to the Cold because I run a very clock hand heavy version, and it's very, very easy for me to get value out of Succumb to the Cold when you're running a clock hand heavy version. And even if I get board wiped, I even run the 3 Bowadirs. Again, you just toss them out of your hand on the mulligan, and then you just draw them as the game progresses. You know how this deck functions. You definitely want Harbinger of the Thralls is the best card. Lysandra is one of the best cards. Preservationist being buffed was huge for this deck. Advance a landmark 3 rounds. What that means is that you can play Preservationist on 4 and set up for a double Draklorn Inquisitor. So basically you play Draklorn Inquisitor and he'll auto-flip 2 landmarks because you're running Preservationist. And usually you also play your Time in the Bottle as well. And it's actually very consistent, that combo. But again, even, though you're comboing out with your win con in Eternal, which is pretty common, you still have your right of negation. Sometimes people run 2, I run 1. And of course you have your Frostbites, and I run 6 Frostbites, because I think Frostbites are very important for Thralls decks to function. And then Sands of Time is sort of, Sands of Time plus Blighted Ravine lets you deal with wide boards. And so all that stuff is exceptionally important. Bowadir lets you refill if someone, hard board wipes you. You can just play Bowadir, and it's not going to matter that you got board wiped. Most of the time you'll actually come out ahead versus the opponent. And then of course Clock Hand when you're very landmark heavy. So again, this deck is exceptionally powerful, and while it is kind of all in, quote-unquote, playing Solitaire, it is still exceptionally interactive. And in fact, there are better constructions for Riven decks. I might recommend a version that I saw someone playing and that I've kind of recreated, and it is, Pantheon Sealed and Steel. I think Pantheon Seal and Steel is the way to go. Because what it does is that as soon as someone goes to remove your Wounded White Flame when it's big, which they will have to do because it's a big Wounded White Flame, as soon as they go to remove that Wounded White Flame, as soon as they go to remove that big Riven, which will happen, every deck will attempt to do so, you will Seal and Steal that card. And you can also Seal and Steal a Sacrificial Scholar as well. I don't run the 1-mana Faded card because it's not very good anymore as a 1-1. It used to be a 1-2 and it was OP, Saga Seeker. As a 1/1, it's just like it's such a free pie toss into every opponent that I just stop running it. I want to run it just for the tribal synergies, but like no, you can't do it. But Bladed Squire is great as a 1-drop. Rune Squire, Rune Weaver, Pale Cascade, Sacrificial Scholar is a great epic card. But yeah, Seal and Steel is what makes this deck happen, because while you're all in on a lot of your units, like you're spamming spells on your Sacrificial Scholar, you're spamming spells on your Riven, you're spamming spells on your Wounded White Flame, you have your Whirling Deaths to capitalize in combat. Again, you have all these ways to buff damage and do things like that. So again, you are all in, but you have that eject cord of Seal and Steel, where you just transfer all of those stats from the Vengeance into an equipment. Or again, I even run Indestructible, which is one of the new cards. I think this card's low-key pretty good in this deck. Because again, like your opponent's, Vengeance is a Riven, and you spend 3 mana to keep her alive. It's pretty nice. It's pretty solid. Just in case I don't draw Seal and Steel. And then the 1 Bastion as well for the Spell Shield. But yeah, this feels good. You're all in on Pantheon, you're all in on Riven, you're all in on your Wounded White Flame, you're all in on your Sacrificial Scholar. Everything else just gives you blade fragments, and you're trading and you don't care about them. But you have that eject cord. You have interaction with Whirling Death during combat, and you have the Seal and Steel when the inevitable removal attempt happens, and even an Indestructible when that inevitable removal attempt happens. And so I would say that this deck, on average, is going to be superior to the Rally variant, because the Rally variant is, you're going to commit all this mana to play this, and then go all in on the Riven and try to OTK, and then the opponent just gets rid of it, and it's not going to matter. So again, Solitaire decks have a place in Eternal. A good example is Ryze. Ryze is one of the best Solitaire decks in the format, simply because it just high rolls so hard certain games. Like, I've had games where someone just, like, raw draws in their opening hand something like 4 landmarks, and it's just like, okay, well, I guess I lost, because that's what the high roll does. So that's an example of a very powerful Solitaire deck. Pantheon, not, considered all that competitive, because Seal and Steel can be countered with the new Explore cards that were printed. They have easy access to equipment removal. So this will never be meta, but this is probably the best way to run this shell, in my opinion, for the most part. And the same thing with the landmark as well. Like, you can just destroy the landmark for exceptionally cheap now, thanks to the new cards that were printed. So it's a good, again, try not to go all in on the Solitaire. I think the most memey version of the Solitaire deck that I saw was running, was pretending to be a Lee Sin deck, but it was actually all in on J, which is in P and Z. So like, it was just playing a bunch of junk and then hiding its true intentions, and it was just playing J Madeira and basically infinitely cycling its spells and making a big J Madeira. That deck was terrible. So again, like, it seemed really funny and it seemed like a great idea, but Solitaire decks are only good if they have a high level of interaction, if they have ways to deal with your opponent's interaction, if they have a win con that is not easily disruptible, things like that. So increasingly, as I become better and better at this format, when it comes to building off-meta decks, and again, you can find all my lists on Runeterra AR, as I become better and better at doing this, I increasingly have a more and more respect for this format in terms of the complexity of deck building, right? It's like, okay, yes, you play Riven, you want to make a big Riven. You play Pantheon, you want to make a big Pantheon, big Wounded White Flame. You have your interaction, you have your burst buffs and all that stuff. But then you've got the Indestructible, which will see 0 standard play, but actually has a place in Eternal. You have Seal and Steel, which I'm not even sure if is available in Standard. It might be. But yeah, there's a place for all of these cards in the extended card format that is Eternal. In Standard, you have one deck that wins 62% of games, and there's no reason to play anything else. Barriers, kind of a similar example, where instead you're interacting with your opponent during combat. But even then, I run Dark and Aegis to keep Kinku students alive, because they're much better with the tough, so they can't be pinged down. Again, the twin disciplines, like, I'm very heavy on burst protection in my barrier shell. Very heavy in burst protection. And you'll notice that I only run 3 barriers. Key Guardian to cycle through my hand. Prismatic Barrier, because on average it's going to be better if you don't get the support trigger, which happens sometimes. Moral Support like seems way better at 2 mana, but like sometimes you just don't get the support trigger. And then this card is awful, so I don't run that. So I just run Riposte and Prismatic Barrier. On average, those things will hit full value. Twin Disciplines on average will hit full value. Darken Aegis can be played on 5 as a supplement for the dragon, which I only run 1 dragon. But yeah, you know, again, deck building is not Solitaire. It's really not Solitaire and Eternal. This is Eternal King, signing out.